Hi everyone. So this morning we will be talking about the skeletal system. So our objective is to explain the skeletal system, to identify the different function of the skeletal system, and of course we will be talking about the bones itself. What are the different composition of the bones, the types of the bones, and its classification. Okay, so but before anything else, I wanted to observe this illustration or picture. So yes, imagine for a moment that people did not have the skeleton. So these pictures or these illustrations give emphasis on the vital role or important role of the skeleton in our body. So without the bones itself or the skeleton, we cannot able to move. Of course, in connection with other system in our body, we cannot able to stand or build brain work. Okay, in addition, also without the skeleton in our body, we cannot able to do these activities like walking, dancing, okay, playing violin, and other physical activities. Okay, so we will be more learning about the skeletal system at the end of this presentation. Okay, so let us start with knowing what is the skeletal system all about. Okay, so skeletal system is usually consists of the bones and other structures that make up the joint of the skeleton. So the skeletal system focus on the bones and its structures. Okay, so when we talk about the joint, a joint is a part of the body when two or more bones meet to allow its movement. So, in other words, because of the skeletal system itself or the bones itself to form a specific joint, we are able to move our body. Of course, in connection with the different system, like for the muscular system in our body. Okay, so this illustration or this presentation also of the outline of the major organs involved in the skeletal system. We have the bones, cartilages, associated ligaments, and bone marrow. Okay, so of course, we will be talking about the bones itself. Okay, pag sinabi nating bones, this is a rigid one or a rigid tissue that is usually constitute the part of the skeleton and most usually as seen in vertebrate animals. Okay, so our bones mainly protect, okay, our organ. Okay, it also produce the red blood cells and white blood cells and other minerals that provide the structure of our body. Okay, so so much for that. We will be discussing that later on the later part of this presentation. Okay, we have also the cartilages or the cartilage. Okay, these are type of connective tissue which is mainly found in our body. So later on, we will be talking also how cartilage form in our body, okay, or in the skeletal system. Okay, associated ligaments. These are usually the connection of bones to other bones to form a specific joint. So also we will be more talking about that on the later part of this presentation. Okay, so bone marrow, this is usually described as spongy substance found in the center of the bone. So later on, makikita natin yung illustration on or where this bone marrow specifically located. Okay, so other thing is the function, more of the function here of the skeletal system itself. Number one is to provide support and protection for other tissues. Okay, number two is store calcium and other minerals. Number three is to form blood cells. So we will be just elaborating this one at this the next presentation for this PowerPoint. Okay, so this is an skeleton illustration in anterior view. So as you can see, these are mainly composed of major parts. So our skeleton is composed of different parts. Okay? So ang pinaka-example dito is the skull of the cranium until sa phalanges sa toes natin. Okay? So isa-isayin natin yan. So alam natin that in our bone, in adult bone, we have 206 to be specific in the entire skeleton. Okay. Okay. So now this time we'll be talking about the different function of the skeleton or the skeletal system in our body. Number one, provides a framework that support the body. Of course, one of the major rule of the skeletal system or the skeleton is to provide framework. Okay, the purpose of the framework here is to give us structures in our body. Okay, so that it will automatically support our entire body. Okay, so we have here the muscle usually attached to the bones in order to move the skeletons, or these are called tendons, the muscle attachment to the bone. So because of the attachment of the muscle in the bone itself, we can able to move our leg. This is just an example. Okay, so another example here, the muscles attached in our scapular or shoulder blade, we can we can able to move our shoulder because of the attachment of the muscle from our shoulder blade. Another example, muscles in our sacral or in our back. Okay, so another one is, as you can see in this illustration, the muscle attachment of the, okay, bones to the muscles, specifically in the rib cage. So we can expand our lungs because we can able to move our lungs by inhaling or exhaling because of the muscle attachment of the bones in our ribs. Okay, number two is to protect some internal organs from mechanical injury. Of course, uh, our skeleton or our skeletal system is designed to protect those internal organs in our body. Of course, for example, we have the rib cages to protect the heart and the lungs. So as you can see, our heart and lungs are protect or surrounded by our ribs. So it is to protect from mechanical injury. Another example here is our brain that is protected by our skull, okay, in our cranial cavity. Okay, so that is the number two function of the skeleton or the skeletal system. The number three is it contains and protect the red bone marrow. Okay, the primary hemopoietic blood forming tissue. So in our bone, uh, there are two types of a bone or bone marrow to be specific. We have the red bone marrow and the yellow bone marrow. The red bone marrow specifically, it usually contains the stem cells. Okay, so from these blood stem cells, it will become the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and the platelets. So that is why it is important that we have this skeletal or skeleton or the bone itself in our body, simply because they provide the blood forming tissue in our body. So sila yung gumagawa, or to be specific, in the bones, the blood itself will develop. Okay. Number four is to provide a storage site for excess calcium. Okay. What is the purpose? Okay. The calcium may remove from the bone. Okay. Uh, to maintain normal blood calcium level, which is very essential or very important in blood clotting, okay, and proper functioning of the muscle and nerve. So please take note of this major rule or important function of the skeleton or skeletal system. Okay, so this is just an illustration that shows the calcium regulation in our body. Okay, we will just be further discuss this one on the later part of this presentation. Okay, now this time we will be focusing our discussion now to the bones itself. Okay, what are the different composition of the bones? What are the bone? What are the different types of the bone and its classification? Okay, so when you say bone, it is a living tissue that makes up the body skeleton. So when you say living tissue, it is primary composed of cells. Okay, living cells ang pinag-uusapan natin dito within the bone. Okay, that make up the body skeleton. So as you can see in this illustration, the bone itself has different parts. Okay, okay, as you can see, the location of our red bone marrow here, the spongy bone, the nerve, blood vessel, compact bone, yellow bone, and other parts. So we will be just uh, discussing this one one by one. Okay, so now, yes, bones are considered organs simply because they contains various types of tissues. Okay, yes, it is composed of different tissues. We have also such as blood, connective tissue, nerves, and bone tissue. So these are most probably the different types of tissue found in our bone. Take note, we have the blood, connective tissue, nerves, and the bone tissue. Okay, so as I said earlier, bones is composed of the living tissue. Now, these living tissue are primarily composed of living cells also. These living cells within the bone, okay, are what we know as osteocytes. This is usually formed at the mineral matrix of the bones. Okay, take note, osteocytes is a living cells of the bone tissue, okay, found in the bone itself. Okay, so addition, no? In baby's body, it has about 300 bones at birth. Pagdating sa adult, it will become or made of usually 206 bone. Okay, so take note, we have 300 bones at birth during baby's body, and pagdating sa adult skeleton, we are primarily made up of these 206 bones. So later on, we will be talking about these 206 bone, okay, in as a part of the skeletal system. Okay, so as mentioned, we have 206 bones. We categorize this one, okay, accordingly. So from the skull, we have 22 bones. Vertebral column, we have 33 bones. From pelvic girdle and lower limbs, we have 62. From thoracic cage, we have 25. And from the shoulder girdle and upper limbs, we have 64. So these are uh, the 206 bones found in our skeleton or skeletal system. Okay, we have also the different types of bones. So primary, as bone as an organ, there are two types of bone tissue present in the bone itself. We have the compact bone and the spongy bone. Now take a look with the difference between the spongy and the compact bone. Also, just be guided with the illustration here of the bone. Okay, when it says spongy bone, it is known as the cancellous or trabecular bone. Okay, it is usually found in long bones and it is surrounded by a compact bone. Okay, while the compact bone is also known as the cortical bone surrounded by spongy bone. They are heavy, tough, and compact in nature. Okay, so in other words, the bones itself is composed primarily of the compact bone and the spongy bone. Okay, we will just elaborate this one. Okay, so as you can see, this is just an illustration where specifically we can locate the spongy and the compact bone in the bone. Okay, there are other parts. We will just discuss this one. Okay, so compact bone. Um, we will just discuss further on the compact bone. So it is usually described physically as solid but very precisely structured. Compact bone is made of osteons or the Habersian system. These Habersian system or the osteon are microscopic cylinders of the bone matrix with osteocytes in concentric rings around the central or Habersian canals. So anong itsura nito? This one, this is the osteon one. So it is a microscopic view of the Habersian system. So maraming mga parts yung ating osteon. So take note that these osteon are that made up the compact bone. Okay, that make the structure more precisely structured or precisely arranged. Okay, this is another illustration for the osteon where can you locate the Harvestian system. So para lang siyang tube na makikita sa bone. Okay, the second type of the bone tissue is the spongy bone, which is does look rather like the sponge. That is why it's a spongy bone. Okay, within is a visible holes or cavities. Okay, the cavities in the spongy bone often contain the red bone marrow, so which is produces the red blood cells, platelets, and five kinds of the white blood cells. So to be specific, makikita sa red blood cells or the red bone marrow in the spongy bone, which is responsible for the blood forming tissues. Okay, like the red blood cells, platelets, and white blood cells. Okay, so this is a comparison of the where can you find the red bone marrow and yellow marrow. So from infant is usually we are primary composed of the red bone marrow. Pagdating sa adult from 25 to above years, basically dyan na nakikita yung yellow bone marrow. Okay, so we have also here some of the major parts of the red bone marrow and the yellow bone marrow to be specific. Sige, isa-isahin natin ito. Uh, we have the epiphysis, diaphysis, and other parts of the red bone marrow and the yellow bone marrow. So, discuss natin yan on the next presentation. Okay, aside from the types of the bone, we have also the different classification of the bone. Yes, we have major classification of the bone. We have the long bones, short bones, flat bones, and irregular bones. Okay, so what are the examples of these different bone types or the classification? Okay, so mostly or to be specific, doon sa bone types, we have these different bone types aside from the compact bone and the spongy bone. So it is based on the structure, okay, size of the bone. So, kung makikita niyo dyan, meron tayong short bone, long bone, flat, sesamoid, and irregular. Take note, these are the different classification or what we known as the bone types in our skeleton. Okay, so long bones, it is, yes, described as usually long, okay, bones in our skeletal system. We have here examples that is usually found in our skeletal system. We have the humerus on the upper arm, radius on ulna in the lower arm. We have also the metacarpals found in our palm or the volar. Okay, we have the phalanges. Okay, metatartals in our toes, tibia and fibula. We have also the femur. Okay, the femur one is considered as the longest bone in our body. Okay, so next one is ito yung sinasabi ko kanina na part ng spongy bone and the compact bone. Uh, sa bones, we have the epiphysis. Take note, yung epiphysis, dito makikita sa taas. Okay? Endpoint or the shaft of a long bone uh, is what we known or the end of the long bone is known as the epiphysis. So yung pinakadulo, ito yung part ng epiphysis. Yung parang center or the entire shaft of the long bone, ang tawag naman is the diaphysis. So nandito yung haba ng bone or the long bone. Okay? So this is another illustration on the diaphysis and the epiphysis. So next, so diaphysis is made usually of compact bone and it is hollow, okay? So forming canal within the shape. So shaft. This marrow canal or medullary cavity contains the yellow bone marrow, which is mostly adipose tissue. Take note of this. Okay, the epiphyses are made of spongy bone. So ito yung kaibahan nila. Ang diaphysis is mostly composed of compact bone. Ang epiphysis naman is mostly composed of spongy bone, which is covered by a thin layer of a compact bone. So although the red bone marrow is present in the epiphysis, okay, of the children's bones, it is largely replaced by yellow bone marrow in adult bone. Okay, so please study on this one. The difference between the diaphysis and the spongy bone or the epiphysis one, where we can simply state that the epiphyses are made up of the spongy and the diaphyses are composed of the compact bone. Okay, so short bones, on the other hand, usually found in the wrist, okay, nasa wrist, and the ankles. Okay, so ang flat bones naman, some of the examples of the flat bones are includes the ribs, shoulder blades, hip bones, and cranial. So please be guided with the illustration picture from visiblebody.com. So these are some of the example of the flat bones. Okay. Now this time we have also the irregular bones. Irregular in the sense that most of these bones are not okay irregular in shape. So examples are usually found in the vertebrae and the other facial bones. So these are some examples of the irregular bones. Vertebrae, we have the sacrum, are considered also as irregular bones. Okay. Um, Short, flat, and irregular bones are categorized as a spongy bone. It is usually covered with thin layer of compact bone. Take note, short, flat, and irregular one are composed of this spongy bone. The red bone marrow, in other words, are found within the spongy bone. Okay, the joint surfaces of the bones are covered with articular cartilages, which provide a smooth surfaces. Okay. So these are articular cartilage usually found or makikita natin or yung nabanggit kanina, smooth surface is found in our uh, skeleton. So yung example dito is the anterior view of the right knee. Okay? So yung blue one is represent as the articular cartilage. So dahil nagagalaw natin yung ating joint, it's also because of the cartilage. Okay? So next, um, so um, that's conclude the lesson today. We will just continue our discussion on the next presentation, more on the skeletal system. Okay, so to sum up, we just mentioned about the different function of the skeletal system. What is the skeletal system all about? The different types of the bones and its classification. Okay, so I do hope you learned something from this presentation. Please take note all of these terms, all of these content of the lecture will be part of our assessment next meeting. So good day everyone and keep safe.